We bought a house that eats dead people and started feeding it. The house devoured the flowers, a small bouquet of peonies brought by my stepmother for my husband. That's when we noticed. In the evening, I put them in a vase. In the morning, it was empty. I didn't bring you any flowers, my stepmother said, genuinely surprised. The kids forgot too. Only my husband and I distinctly remembered how she burst into the hallway with flowers, hurrying to congratulate us on our new home. The house's appetites soon became obvious. Anything theoretically edible disappeared. Meat didn't last in the fridge for more than a night. Vegetables rotted within hours, leaving no trace. Even wooden furniture aged at a terrifying speed, breaking within a few months. Each time something like this happened, my husband and I exchanged knowing looks. Even the kids denied that we'd gone grocery shopping the day before, or that a dining table ever existed. Of course, it frightened me. I was afraid I'd wake up one morning and find that I had no hand, or that one of the children had simply vanished. My husband tried to reassure me. The house doesn't touch the living. Actually, we've all become much healthier than ever before. Even Grace, hardly ever sick, and our son, as healthy as a horse excelling in second grade, seemed to thrive. Our white Labrador, King, also reveled in life despite his advanced age. We need to move again. I began the conversation. We don't know what it's capable of. Who knows when it'll decide one of us would make a good snack? You're probably right, my husband replied. He always wanted to make me happy. And so, for a while, we diligently scoured real estate websites in search of other houses. Property prices soared rapidly. Mortgage rates increased each passing day, and the prospect of moving seemed more and more elusive. Then the dog died. We should have foreseen it. He became very sluggish and hadn't walked for 2 whole days. One night, he made that strange noise that woke us in the middle of the night. When we went downstairs, we found him in the living room, lifeless. We'll figure everything out in the morning, my husband said, holding me tightly. King was my dog before we got married. I hugged my friend one last time and said goodbye. By morning, he was gone. The kids were happily playing in the yard, my husband making pancakes, and I gazing at the ocean. Suddenly, my son ran up to me with a dog toy in hand. Mom, look, probably. A neighbor's dog left a bunch of them in our yard. That's not good, I told my husband that evening. It's not right. Maybe it's for the best. They're happy because they remember they had a dog. They loved King, and now it's like he never existed. Some things are better forgotten. Meanwhile, memories flooded back from my own childhood. My beloved black cat, strangled by a neighbor's dog. The first time someone I loved died, it took me weeks to fully comprehend. I kept waiting for her to come and curl up beside me. But then it hit me. She'd never come back. She'd never recover. A pet's death. It's the first step into adulthood. I couldn't agree with my husband on this. It's one of those things that define you. What you remember, leaving scars that decorate our souls. I love you and all your scars, I said. If we can protect our children, why shouldn't we? Eventually, I curled up beside him, too tired to argue. Who did this house belong to before you? My sister, Emmy, asked one evening over a glass of wine. I told her everything, but when I tried to prove my words by spilling some wine, the house refused to cooperate. The spill remained on the tiles. The house had secrets. Emmy had a son, Carter. In second grade like mine, we watched them play in the backyard, wielding padded swords against each other. Some lonely old lady sold it to us. She decided to move into a smaller house. Isn't it typical for people with their last child off to college? Yet she seemed to have no family at all. I pondered this for a few seconds. Now, when my sister voiced it out loud, the realtor's wording did sound strange. I wanted to continue the discussion, but the kids started arguing, distracting us. Do you think this house has spoiled the taste of the wine? I grimaced. It tastes like vinegar, but I don't mind a bit of aging. Besides, I've always known you have a thing about your head. I knew you wouldn't believe me. Oh no, I believe you about the house, but I also think you have a thing about your head after Emmy left. Her blunt comment about the previous owner came to mind. What if that woman had a family? What if they died in this house? And she erased their memory too. Did she remember her own kin? I couldn't sleep. Questions circled my mind like a carousel until I finally gave in and went to the kitchen, faint hope in tow. I opened the fridge, hoping for a piece of leftover cake, but of course it was long gone, along with the paper plates and everything else. The kitchen had become entirely sterile within a couple of hours. You could perform surgery on the countertops. So I headed to my office and found information about the previous owner. Her name was Pamela, over 50 years old, and she owned this house all alone. Not quite sure what I was going to say, I hastily drafted her an email, inviting her for coffee. It was already 3:00 a.m., so I didn't expect a reply for several hours, maybe days. Yet, she responded almost immediately, inviting me over this morning. Pamela's apartment had already turned into a mess. "You'll have to forgive me for the mess," Pamela said, as I dusted off the couch before sitting. I nodded, and she headed to the disorderly kitchen. There was something calming about the chaos of this place. Suddenly, I realized I hadn't washed my own towels for several months. There simply hadn't been a need. A few minutes later, the owner returned with coffee. "The house has a strange effect on the beans, doesn't it?" she said. "Have you noticed any unusual properties? Of course, this house is always hungry, not necessarily in a bad way. Understand me correctly. Tell me, both you and your husband are owners." "Certainly. Glad for you." "The house was solely and completely mine, and only I remember everything. The realtor said you had no husband, no family at all. That's how the world remembers it. The only true version of events left here." She tapped her bony finger on her forehead. "I had children too, lovely children. But now, everything's gone. The house erased them." I left the meeting with Pamela, shaken, but certain that I hadn't lost my mind. The house fed on the dead. I was just considering what this would mean for our family when Emmy called me in hysteria. "What happened again and again?" I asked. I hoped she'd calm down, though I didn't want to know. Emmy wasn't one to cry over nothing, so her convulsions on the other end of the line could mean only one thing: Carter. Finally, she managed to say it. He was coming home from school, crossing the road, probably not looking. The doctors said it happened instantly. He felt nothing. Carter was the center of Emmy's life. She was a single mother, and everything she did revolved around her son. But we couldn't be with her around the clock. She started drinking. She stared at the TV with vacant eyes, barely able to get off the couch to reach the bathroom. All the while, Carter's urn sat on the mantel, a reminder that he was no longer there. The worst part was, I couldn't even blame her. What was left to expect from a grieving mother? She'd just drink until she died, and I couldn't do anything about it. My husband hugged me. "If only," he started. "If only, don't tell me you didn't think about it. It'll be just like with King. Remember how happy the kids were? We won't erase Carter." "All right, but if we don't, maybe the next one will be your sister will have to cremate." That night, as I shaved, the cuts, the drops of blood, rolled down my leg, disappearing before reaching the drain. I imagined dying in this house, how quickly my body would decompose and vanish, how happy my children would be the next morning, not even remembering they once had a mother. That's when I truly began to fear my home. Yes, it's just a tool, but a dangerous one, leading to oblivion, and that's worse than death. So, trembling, I stood, despite the torrents of hot water, praying to die outside these walls. Yet I wasn't ready to leave this instrument, no matter how dangerous it might be. It could find a use. "Elevate," I said to Emmy a few days later. "I know you don't want to, but we must." "No." Weakly, still staring at the TV. "Seriously, you need some darn daylight. It stinks in here, and you'll never feel better unless you try." "Why would I want to feel better? What's the point?" Tears welled up in my eyes. "You're right," I said. That night, I waited for my sister to doze off, covered her with a blanket, and took Carter's urn, leaving the house. My husband embraced me at the door, seeing the burden in my hands. "You're doing the right thing, saving her." The house had hot spots where it consumed much faster than the kitchen or the bathroom. But worst of all was the basement. Everything down there disappeared in mere minutes. I went down with Carter's urn, quickly kissed it, and placed it on the floor. The next hour, I sat on the stairs, watching. First, All the marks and fingerprints vanished from the urn. Then, a quiet sound from within, like rustling silk. The metal suddenly softened before my eyes. When I wiped my palms against it, the inscription, Carter's name, vanished too. I approached the urn, lifting it, empty and light. The next morning, I woke to a knock on the front door. Emmy stood outside in sports gear. "What's happening?" I woke up and did the worst thing a woman can do. I stepped on the scales, and I gained almost 15 pounds. "Well, I imagine the new, healthy you," she said. "Enough of my solitude. I'll step out into the world and take what I want." "Cool. And what do you want? Isn't it obvious?" She gestured towards my house. "Great husband. Great kids. A fantastic house. It's just life, sis. And I won't rest until I've circled the same." Tears streamed down my cheeks, and I realized I'd never explained to her why everything's all right with you. My sister worried. "It'll all be okay." I lied, waving goodbye, watching her tears vanish into my home's insatiable maw.